It's Thursday evening, about 5:30, and you're hungry standing in front of the refrigerator. You've had a long day and you're tired. You're hungry and you're just staring. You close the refrigerator and open the freezer. Nothing jumps out at you there either. So you check the pantry. And for reasons that I still can't explain, you go back and open the refrigerator one more time, as though dinner may have magically appeared in the last 30 seconds. We've all done it. And the funny thing is, it's probably not just because there isn't any food in the house. There might be plenty of food. And it probably is not because you don't know how to make a healthy meal either. You know how to cook some chicken, roast some vegetables, put a salad together. You know all of that. The problem is you don't want to have to figure it out right now. You've been figuring things out all day. And at 5:30, when you're tired and hungry, figuring out what to make for dinner feels like one more decision, one too many. So you stand there for another minute, and then somebody says, "Do you want to just order something?" And you think, "Yes. Yes, I do." Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with ordering dinner. Some nights, that's exactly what we're going to do. But I want to use this very ordinary moment to talk about something that I think we sometimes misunderstand when we're trying to live healthier lives. Because when this happens repeatedly, we have a tendency to blame ourselves. We think we need more discipline. We tell ourselves we need to be more motivated, or maybe we use that phrase, "I just really need to get back on track." And I've been thinking about that phrase a lot lately since starting to write this episode. And I'm not sure we need to go back to anything. Maybe what we actually need is a better plan for 5:30 on Thursday.
Scream it out and say you're worth it, though you feel you're not worth it.
Welcome back to the Nurse with Regina podcast, where we talk about transforming your plate and transforming your life. If you're new here, hello, I'm Regina. I'm a wife, mom of 4 adult children, a certified nutrition coach, and yes, someone who knows an awful lot about nutrition and still has stood in front of the refrigerator thinking there is absolutely nothing to eat in this house while looking directly at food. So today we're talking about the back to routine blueprint. And this is one of those episodes that feels especially timely as summer starts to wind down and life begins to find a different rhythm again, right? So for a lot of families, school is starting, activities are picking up, your work schedule might be changing, vacations are ending, your calendars start getting a little fuller. There's just this natural feeling at this time of year that says, okay, it's time to get back into a routine. I actually love a good routine. I like knowing what's coming. I also like planning everything. If you know me, you know I try and plan everything as much as possible. Not that it always works out, but I like having a plan. And I know from my own life that when I've thought ahead even a little bit, taking care of myself becomes so much easier. But there's a difference between having a routine that supports you, right? And trying to force yourself back into a routine simply because it worked for some previous version of yourself. And that's where I think we need to change the conversation today. Because I don't really want to help you get back on track. I want to help you recalibrate. Now, we've talked about recalibration on this podcast before, and I keep coming back to that word because it gives us permission to acknowledge something really important. We're changing. The life you're living today isn't actually the life you were living in January. And you're not exactly the same person you were in January either. You've lived 8 months since then. You've learned things. Maybe you've learned something new about your body that you didn't know before. Maybe you figured out that something you were doing really wasn't working well for you. Maybe you've gotten stronger. Maybe your health goals have changed. Maybe your work schedule is different, or your family is in a new season. Or maybe you've simply matured enough to realize, you know what, I don't want to keep that going anymore. That's called growth. So why would we take everything we've learned and try and squeeze back into our old routine? I don't want to go backward. I want to stand where I am today and look at the life I'm actually living and say, okay, knowing what I know, what would support me here? That's recalibration. And that is what I want us to build today. I called this episode a blueprint very intentionally. So I want you to think about the blueprint for a house. The blueprint gives you the basic structure. It tells you where the rooms will go and the walls and how everything needs to fit together so the house can actually function. But it doesn't make every house look the same. Once we have the structure, you get to decide whether you want hardwood or carpeted floors. You can choose the paint colors. You can make the kitchen modern or traditional. You can make that house feel like yours. And I think a healthy routine should work the same way. So there's some basic things our bodies need, right? We need nourishment. We need movement. We need rest. We need ways to manage stress. And I believe we need to make room to nourish our mind and spirits too. But what those things look like in your life may look very different from what they look like in mine or in yours 2 years ago. And that's okay. Because a healthy routine isn't one you have to organize your whole life around. It's one that helps you nourish yourself in the life you're actually living. I want you to hold on to that sentence today, and I'm going to repeat it. So a healthy routine isn't one you have to organize your whole life around. It's one that helps you nourish yourself in the life you're actually living. Because I don't want you to leave this episode today and have a plan that's going to require you to become a completely different person just to be able to follow it, because that's kind of counterproductive. That's exactly what we're not going to be doing today. I forgot the microphone. You don't need 12 new habits, right? You don't need a 4-hour Sunday meal prep session unless that's something you really enjoy doing. You don't need to wake up at 5 in the morning because some influencer on Instagram said healthy people wake up at 5 in the morning. I assure you, there are plenty of perfectly healthy, successful people who are still unconscious at 5 a.m. What I want to help you do is to look at your real life and find the places where a little bit of planning could make taking care of yourself easier for you. Because I have become a huge believer in planning for the person I am going to be when life gets busy. Not just the person I am when I am motivated. And that's an important distinction. It's easy to make a beautiful plan when you're rested, the refrigerator's full, and the week hasn't started yet. But I know myself well enough to know that there will be a Thursday at 5:30. There will be a day when something runs late. There will be a night when I just don't feel like cooking. There will be a morning when I don't have an extra 30 minutes. And this is not me failing at my routine. It's life. Life can get messy. So instead of creating a routine that only works when everything's going according to plan, I want one that has room in it for being human. And this connects so beautifully to what we talked about last week in What Do Healthy Women Do Differently? We spent that episode imagining the person we're becoming and asking, is this a choice the person I am becoming would make? Apparently I needed to go to bed a little earlier last night. There's another way we can care for our future versions of ourselves. We can stop making them figure everything out at the hardest possible moment. So, Sunday me can look at Thursday me and say, I know you're going to be tired. I know you're going to get home late. I know something's going to happen at some point during the week, right? Because it always does. So don't worry, dinner's handled. And there's something about that that feels less restrictive to me and much more like care. I'm not controlling future Regina. I'm taking care of her. And that's where I think routine can sometimes get a bad reputation. A routine doesn't have to be rigid. It doesn't have to mean every day looks exactly the same. It doesn't have to fall apart because you went on vacation or had a busy week. A good routine simply gives you a few things you don't have to keep reinventing. It creates a little structure underneath your life. So when life gets noisy, you still have something supporting you. And there's actually some really interesting science behind why all this matters. Why making certain decisions ahead of time can help us identify when we're tired or stressed, why repeated behaviors can eventually require less conscious effort, and why trying to change everything at once doesn't make taking care of ourselves harder, but it makes it easier. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we add anything, I want to do something that I think most of us skip when we decide it's time for a reset. I want to look at what you're already doing right. Because you don't need to rebuild the entire house. You might just need a little recalibration. So let's start there. So before we start adding anything new, I want to resist the urge to immediately start fixing things, right? Because that's what we usually do, isn't it? We decide we're ready to get healthier or get organized or get back into this routine. And then suddenly we're looking at our lives like one big giant home improvement project. We're going to change our breakfast. We're going to start working out. We're going to go to bed earlier. We're going to drink more water. We're going to meal prep on Sundays and get organized and spend less time on our phones and pray more. And while we're at it, apparently we're going to clean out the garage too. By Monday, and I think sometimes we get so focused on everything we want to change that we don't stop long enough to look at what is already working. So before we start renovating, let's walk through the house. I want you to think about your normal week, not your best week, not vacation week, not the imaginary week where nobody gets sick, every meeting ends on time, and you have endless energy, your actual week. So as you think back on your actual real life week, where are things already flowing pretty well? Maybe breakfast is one thing that's actually working really well for you. Maybe you've gotten in the habit of taking a walk after dinner or going to the gym right after work, and that works really well for you and you enjoy it. Maybe you finally got protective about your bedtime and you have a great routine in place there. Maybe you found a couple meals that your family really likes that are super easy to make. Whatever it is, notice it. Because if something is working, we don't need to mess with it just because we're recalibrating. And I think that's important because there's something very tempting about starting fresh. There's actually a name that researchers have given to part of this phenomenon. It's called the fresh start effect. So, researchers have found that temporal landmarks, things like New Year's, a birthday, the beginning of a month, even the beginning of a week, can create this psychological separation between the person we were before and the person we're going to be after. That sometimes can be very useful. It can give us a little burst of motivation, There's a reason January feels like a natural time to set goals. There's a reason Monday morning feels like the beginning of something new instead of like a Thursday morning, right? And there's probably a reason that late August and early September make us want to buy new planners and organize our lives. If you know me, you know I love a new planner. So I absolutely understand the appeal. But that fresh start feeling can also tempt us into believing that everything needs to change because we're starting a new season. And it doesn't. Maybe you're already doing a lot of things really well. The question isn't, how do I become a completely different person this fall? It's, what would make the life I'm already living work a little better? And that's a much gentler question. And I think it's a much more useful question, too. So, as you're mentally walking through your week, now I want you to notice all of the places where things tend to get harder than they need to be. Not because we're judging them, but because we're looking for patterns. For me, one of the biggest clues is when I find myself having the same problem over and over again. If I'm getting to 5:30 3 nights a week and don't know what's for dinner, that's information. If I'm continually skipping lunch because my afternoons get too busy, that's information. If I keep saying I want to move my body, but every single day it gets to the end of the day and I haven't made room for it, that's information too. Doesn't mean I'm lazy. It doesn't mean I'm undisciplined. It means the routine I've built isn't supporting something that I say matters to me. And now I have something to work with. This is where planning becomes so powerful. And I want to distinguish planning from trying to control your entire life. Because I'm not talking about scheduling every 15 minutes of your day. Life will laugh at the plan anyways. I'm talking about looking ahead long enough to see what you can reasonably predict. Because some of the things that derail us aren't surprising at all. We just treat them like surprises every week. For instance, we know soccer practice is on Tuesdays, or we know this meeting is Thursday night, or we know we're going to have to work late on Wednesday. We know we're going to be hungry tomorrow, and that last one is incredibly predictable. And yet sometimes we wait until we're standing in the middle of things to decide how we're going to handle it. That's where I think we can take such good care of future us. Not by predicting everything that might happen, but by planning around things we know are going to happen. And there's some interesting behavior science underneath this as well. So one area that's been studied quite a bit is something called implementation intentions. So it sounds very academic, but the concept is wonderfully practical. I want to do this thing, right? So we connect the behavior to a specific situation. Essentially, when this happens, this is what I plan to do. So research on implementation intentions has found that these kind of specific plans can help close some of the gap between what we intend to do and what we actually do. And I love that because isn't that the gap we're talking about? Most of us already intend to take care of ourselves. We intend to eat well. We intend to move. We intend to get enough sleep. Problem often isn't knowing what we want to do, but it's Tuesday happening, right? So instead of I'm going to eat healthier this week, maybe I look at my calendar and realize Tuesday night is packed. Now I can say Tuesday is going to be crazy. So that's the night I'm putting a dump and go meal in the slow cooker before I leave in the morning. Heck, I could even get it ready the night before. So all I have to do is plop it in the slow cooker in the morning and plug it in. I just made Tuesday easier. Or maybe that I know if I wait until 5 p.m. to exercise, there's about a 97% chance I'm going to find something else that needs done. So instead of continuing to tell myself I'm going to try harder at 5, I put 2 realistic movement times on my calendar earlier in the day. Again, I'm not trying to be more disciplined. I'm creating fewer opportunities to have to negotiate with myself. And that idea becomes especially important when we're tired or stressed. Because despite what some of the old pop psychology versions of decision fatigue would have us believe, we don't have a scientifically established little tank of decision-making power that simply hits empty at a certain point every day. Human behavior is much more complicated than that. But cognitive load is real. Stress affects us. Hunger affects us. Sleep affects us. And having to repeatedly stop and evaluate options and make decisions requires attention and mental effort. So, if I can make a few predictable decisions before I'm tired, why wouldn't I? This is something I think we confuse with willpower. We look at somebody who's incredibly consistent and think, wow, she must be so disciplined, or he has so much more willpower than I do. Maybe. But I also wonder how many times that person simply doesn't have to make that decision anymore. Think about brushing your teeth. You probably don't wake up every morning and lie in bed having a debate about whether today is a toothbrushing day or not. You don't need a motivational podcast first. You just do it. It's part of your routine. That behavior has a place in your life. I mean, I even know for me, it has a specific place in my getting ready in the morning routine, right? So that's what we're trying to create with some of these nourishing habits. Not perfection, not rigidity, familiarity. A little less negotiation, a little less figuring everything out from scratch repeatedly, and a little more of, oh, well, this is what I should do. And that's why I am such a believer in putting actual planning time on the calendar. Not necessarily hours. Sometimes 20 minutes is enough. But sit down with your calendar before the week gets moving. Because I don't want you planning your meals without looking at your life. Those two things belong together. So when I do mine, one of the first things I do is put in all of the things I have going on that week. So, next week I have 2 nights that I have events to go to. So I put that on my calendar first because I know those 2 dinners are going to need to be fast and easy because I'm not going to have a lot of time, right? So if your Thursday night is packed from morning until night, Thursday probably isn't the night to plan a new recipe that you found on Pinterest that has 23 ingredients. That's not a failure of healthy eating. That's poor planning. Put that recipe on Wednesday when you have time to enjoy making it. Thursday gets an easy dinner or a crock pot dinner. And maybe Friday is leftovers because you got something going on that night too. I love, with fall, we're getting into soup season, and I love soup season because it gives you a plethora of leftovers and easy meals. You can freeze it. You can put it in the refrigerator and have it for lunch all week. It's just fantastic, right? I just want you to know that this is what I mean when I say your routine needs to support your life. And while you're doing that, I want you to start paying attention to one more thing. Where are you repeatedly expecting yourself to make a difficult choice when you could simply make a choice that's easier? Because I think that's where our blueprint really starts taking shape. We aren't asking, how can I become more disciplined? We're asking, how can I make the choice I want to make earlier to choose? And now, there's nowhere that is more obvious than in the kitchen, because if you want to see how powerful a little preparation can be, wait until everybody's hungry. So let's talk about what this actually looks like with food. Not 4 hours of meal prep, not 7 different breakfasts, not 21 perfectly portioned containers lined up across your refrigerator, just a realistic plan for real life. So mentally, let's go back to the kitchen. And I want to start by saying something that may sound incredibly obvious, you are going to need to eat this week. I know, groundbreaking nutrition advice, right? But I think about how often we treat meals like they snuck up on us. It's noon and suddenly, oh shoot, I need a lunch. Or it's 5:30 and oh yeah, these people want dinner again. Every day they want dinner and it's relentless. But meals are one of the most predictable parts of our lives. And because they're predictable, they're also one of the easiest places to take care of future you. Now, when I say meal planning, I know what some of you are picturing. You're picturing spending half of Sunday in the kitchen with 14 glass containers laid out on the counter in front of you, weighing chicken breasts and portioning broccoli. And if you love doing that, great. But I don't believe that's necessary. I probably do that a little more closer to that because I do love doing it. And for me, it fits into my routine. It makes my life easier. But we're trying to do what makes your life easier. I don't think you need 7 different breakfasts and 7 different lunches either. Honestly, I think sometimes we make healthy eating much more complicated than it needs to be. Most of us are perfectly happy eating the same few breakfasts on repeat, and the same with lunch. So instead of trying to create a variety just for the sake of variety, I'd rather you find a couple meals that you actually really enjoy, that nourish you well, and that you can make without having to think very hard. That's not boring. That's a system. So breakfast is one really good example because, I talk about protein at breakfast quite often. And that's not because there's something magical that happens at 8:03 in the morning when you eat an egg. It's because for many people, a breakfast with meaningful amounts of protein can help make it easier to feel satisfied throughout the morning. Protein also gives us amino acids, and our bodies need those amino acids to maintain and repair tissue and build muscle, which becomes increasingly important as we age. And depending on what you eat alongside it, a balanced breakfast that includes protein and fiber and quality carbohydrates can also give you a much steadier start than grabbing something that's mostly refined carbs and then wondering why you're hungry again an hour later. So that's why I sometimes say that a good breakfast can save your entire day. Not because breakfast is mandatory for every person. I highly recommend breakfast. And not because eating protein in the morning guarantees you'll make perfect choices until bedtime. It just means you're not spending the rest of the day playing catch up with your hunger. And this is where routine becomes your friend. So maybe you find 2 breakfasts that work beautifully for you. Not because Regina said you may only have 2 breakfasts, but because they're easy. So maybe one is eggs with some vegetables, avocado, and some fruit. Maybe the other is Greek yogurt with berries or a great protein smoothie that has enough protein in it that it actually qualifies for a breakfast and not just fruit wearing a cute outfit. You know, you like these breakfasts, they make you feel good, you keep the ingredients in the house, and now breakfast doesn't require a committee meeting. Lunch can work the same way. This is actually one of those places where I think we can learn a lot from ourselves. What lunches do you already know you like? What can you make in 5 or 10 minutes? What can you pack the night before if you're going to work? Maybe it's leftovers from dinner. Maybe you make a little extra at night so you have it for lunch the next day. Then there's no additional cooking involved in that kind of planning, right? Maybe it's a big salad with chicken or salmon and all the kinds of vegetables and things you enjoy on it. Maybe it's a sandwich with a good source of protein, some vegetables or fruit on the side. The specific meal isn't nearly as important as the fact that when noon comes, you already have your answer, right? That's what we're trying to create. not perfect meals, but answers. Because every answer we already have is one less decision we're asking ourselves to make when we're hungry or tired or stressed. Dinner can sometimes get a little trickier because dinner usually has more moving parts. Maybe we're feeding a spouse, kids, everybody has somewhere to be. Somebody doesn't like what you made. Somebody else suddenly announces they need to leave in 12 minutes. We know that's how life gets, right? And this is why I think one of the best things you can do when you're planning your week is look at the calendar before you choose the meals, not after. If Monday is wide open, maybe that's the night you cook something that takes a little longer. But if Tuesday is one of those nights where everyone is coming and going, Tuesday doesn't need ambition. Tuesday needs dinner. And that's where I love having what I call my back pocket meals, meals that I don't have to think very hard about, things I can either dump into a slow cooker or on a sheet pan, something I've already made, maybe put in the freezer, a protein I can cook quickly with frozen vegetables and an easy side, maybe leftovers, and yes, maybe it's a rotisserie chicken. I want to say something here because I think it's important. Convenience is not cheating. Somewhere along the way, we got this idea that if we're really committed to healthy eating, everything needs to be homemade, fresh, and prepared beautifully from scratch. That's not true. Frozen vegetables count. Pre-cut vegetables count. Bagged salads count. Pre-cooked chicken can count. Canned beans count. A freezer meal you made 3 weeks ago absolutely counts. You do not get extra nutrition points because you personally chopped broccoli. Sometimes spending a little more on something that saves you 20 minutes is one of the smartest investments you can make in your routine. Because what are we trying to do? We're trying to remove the barrier. If the barrier between me and eating vegetables tonight is that I absolutely do not want to wash and chop a head of broccoli, buy the bag. That's not laziness, that's knowing yourself. That's self-awareness, right? I think we need more of that. We need to stop designing our routines for the person we wish we were at the end of a long day and start designing them for the person we actually are, because I know myself. There are days when I genuinely enjoy cooking. And for me, that is most days. I love being in the kitchen. I love creating meals. I love feeding my family. But there are other days when 5:30 arrives and I would like dinner to require approximately 4 minutes of my attention. But both of those me's deserve to eat well and be nourished. Sometimes I even know in the morning and I'll call my husband and be like, I can't do dinner tonight. I just mentally can't. I can't. I got too much going on. I'm stressed. Would you please figure it out? And then I'm happy with what he figures out, right? But that's also why I keep a couple easy dinners in the freezer or ingredients for some of my super easy dinners, which if you follow my Instagram or Facebook, I'll be posting some of those videos on there. But um, I keep those things around. I keep some meals in the freezer. And I'm not talking about a sad emergency meal that everybody groans about when you pull it out. I mean meals you actually like. So I love a good dump and go meal. Something I can put together ahead of time, freeze, and then on one of those mornings when I know I'm going to have like 0 minutes for dinner that night, I can pull it out and put it in the slow cooker, and dinner is essentially cooking itself while I'm doing everything else. That's future Regina taking care of Thursday Regina. And when I walk into the house at 5:30 and dinner already smells good, past Regina is my favorite person. But here's what I really want you to notice. None of this required more willpower. I changed the environment around the decision. And that's really important piece of behavior change. Our choices don't happen in a vacuum. What is available to us matters. What's convenient matters. What we can see matters. and how many steps a behavior requires matters. So if the food I want to eat is already in the house and is easy to prepare, I've lowered the friction around that choice. Behavioral science gives us good reason to pay attention to that too. So our environments and cues play meaningful role in habitual behaviors. So changing the context or making a desired behavior easier to perform can help support the patterns we're trying to establish. I think that's actually a much kinder of an approach than constantly demanding more willpower from ourselves. Why can't I make myself do this? I can ask instead, what keeps making this difficult? Which is a completely different question, right? Maybe the problem isn't that you don't like vegetables. Maybe you don't like preparing the vegetables, right? Maybe buying them already cut makes it so much easier on you. Then buy them frozen, buy them pre-cut. It's okay. You're still getting your vegetables in. Maybe you want to eat more protein at lunch, but every morning you're trying to figure out what to pack while simultaneously getting yourself out the door on time. Okay. Like I said before, could you make an extra serving at dinner and pack it before kitchen cleanup? Maybe breakfast is chaos because you have exactly 6 minutes. Maybe you don't like to get up way before you have to leave for work. Okay. Then we're not choosing breakfasts that take 15 minutes. We're not trying to force your life to accommodate the plan. We are creating a plan that accommodates your life. And this is where the blueprint analogy really starts making sense to me because we're putting in the basic structure. We know we want nourishment to have a place in the house, but you get to decide what that looks like. Your kitchen doesn't have to look like mine. Your breakfast doesn't have to look like mine. Your schedule doesn't have to look like mine. We just want the structure underneath to make taking care of yourself easier. And there's one more piece of this I think is really important, which is have a backup. Not because you're expecting yourself to fail, but because you're expecting life to happen and get messy like we know it does. Your meeting runs late. You forgot to thaw the chicken. Someone gets sick. You come home exhausted. You get sick or have a horrible headache. That's when the freezer meal matters. That's when eggs for dinner night matters. That's when having something simple in the pantry matters. And sometimes that's when you order takeout. But now even that can be an intentional choice instead of a desperate one. You can have 2 to 3 places where you already know that you enjoy eating from. So if I get to a night where we're just going to order out, these are the things I can order that leave me feeling good. Again, it's one less decision. That's the blueprint. Not I will follow my meal plan more perfectly. It's I've thought about what I'll need before I need it. And I think that's such a beautiful way to care for ourselves. There's something else I see happen all the time. We see or we hear everything I just said, and we think, great, I'm going to start planning meals. And while I'm at it, I'm going to start exercising 5 days a week, drinking more water, going to bed at 7, getting up earlier at 5 to work out, cutting out all the sugar. I'm going to journal. I'm going to meditate. And suddenly, our nice supportive blueprint has turned into a 14,000 square foot mansion we're trying to build by Monday. And then things start falling apart. Because more healthy habits aren't necessarily better if there are too many of them for you to actually practice. So before we add another floor to this house, I think we need to talk about why trying to change everything at once feels so motivating in the beginning and why it so often ends with us feeling like we failed. Because you probably don't need 10 new habits. You may just need to figure out which one makes everything a little easier for now. I think this is one of the biggest traps in getting back into the routine because there's something about deciding we're ready for a fresh start that makes us want to change everything. And I understand it. There's something really satisfying about sitting down with a brand new planner and thinking, okay, this is it. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to plan my meals. This is my workout schedule. And we get excited, and pretty soon we've created this entirely new life for ourselves. One small problem is, though, we still have to live our old life while we're trying to do all of it. The job is still there. The kids still need things. The laundry didn't get the memo about our fresh start. But we still have appointments and commitments and people who need us. And now, on top of everything we were already doing, we've handed ourselves a whole new set of responsibilities. So for the first few days, it feels great. We're motivated. We're checking off boxes. And then something happens. Because something always happens. We don't sleep well one night, or work gets crazy, or there's an unexpected appointment, or you have to pick your kid up early from school because they're sick, and suddenly the beautiful routine we created starts unraveling. And this is the part that bothers me, because when that happens, we almost always make it mean something about us. I knew I wouldn't stick with it. I just don't have any discipline. Why can't I ever follow through? We start beating ourselves up. But what if that problem wasn't you? What if you simply tried to build too much too quickly? We talked quite a bit about habits in last week's episode, and I don't want to repeat that whole conversation here. But there's one part worth coming back to. Habits don't become habits because we decide they're important. They become more automatic through repetition. We do something, then we do it again and again, often in a similar context, and gradually that behavior can require less conscious thought. That's the goal. Not to spend the rest of your life summoning enough motivation every morning to make yourself do all the things. We want some of those things to simply become what we do. And the science of habit formation is actually much messier and much more forgiving than a lot of those catchy claims we've heard over the years. You've probably heard it takes about 21 days to form a habit, or maybe you've heard 66. There's been, several studies out there, but researchers now don't give us one magic number. A recent systematic review found enormous variations in time health related behaviors to become habitual. So, a lot of times they'll measure them in months, not some magical 3-week transformation. Things like the behavior itself, the person, the context, and how consistently it's repeated all matter and make an impact. I actually find that very encouraging because it means if something still requires effort after 3 weeks, nothing has gone wrong. You're learning, you're practicing. Your brain is still getting familiar with the pattern. But imagine trying to do that with 10 new behaviors at the same time. Every one of them still needs your attention. Every one of them still requires some planning. Every one of them has its own little decisions attached to it. And that's a lot to ask of yourself when you're also living an actual life. So rather than asking, what are all the things I need to change? I want to give you a different question. And I think this may be one of the most useful questions in today's episode. What one change would make several other healthy choices easier? Now think about that. Not the thing that you think you should work on. the thing that might create a ripple. For me, planning is often that thing. If I take a little time to look at my week, dinner gets easier. Grocery shopping gets easier. I'm less likely to realize at 5:30 that I don't have what I need. I'm less stressed about food. And because dinner isn't taking up all of my mental energy, I may actually have some room left for something else. One habit, several ripples. For someone else, it might be sleep. Maybe you've been telling yourself you need to exercise more, eat better, and have more patience and stop relying on caffeine to get through the afternoon. But you're sleeping 5.5 hours a night. Maybe we don't start with a new workout plan. Maybe we start with a bedtime. Because sleep isn't just about whether you feel tired. It affects how we function the next day. Our attention, our mood, our glucose regulation, appetite-related processes. Chronic insufficient sleep is associated with poor metabolic and cardiovascular health. So maybe future you doesn't need another thing to be added in the morning. Maybe future you needs current you to go to bed. That's not as exciting as buying a new workout outfit. I realize that. But it might be the thing that makes workout easier later. And that's what I mean by looking for the ripple. Maybe for you, it's breakfast. You notice that on mornings when you eat a nourishing breakfast with enough protein, you aren't absolutely ravenous by 11 o'clock. Lunch feels easier. The afternoon feels different. You're not arriving at dinner feeling like you could eat the kitchen counter. So instead of changing your entire diet, you work on breakfast. You practice that until it becomes familiar. And then you see what happens. So I think this is where we need to give ourselves permission to go slower. Because slower doesn't mean you're less committed. Sometimes slower is actually what makes the change sustainable. You're giving yourself enough room to actually learn the behavior, to figure out where it gets difficult, to adjust it, to repeat it, and eventually to stop thinking about it so much. And I want to add something here because I know how our brains work. If I tell you to choose one thing, some of you are immediately thinking, okay, but which thing is the best thing? There isn't one. Surprise. Go back to the routine audit we did. Where does your life keep getting unnecessarily hard? That's where I'd look. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's sleep. Maybe it's movement. Maybe it's the fact that you don't have 5 minutes of your day that aren't already promised to somebody else. That's information. And we're going to talk about that last one in a minute. But first, I want to talk about movement. Because movement is one of the places where our all or nothing thinking shows up in a really obvious way. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen someone decide they're getting back into exercise and immediately create a workout schedule for a person who apparently has no job, no family, no commute, and unlimited access to a gym. And then real life happens. So let's change the question. Instead of asking, what's the ideal workout routine? What if we asked, what movement can I realistically repeat in the life I'm living right now? Maybe you would love to work out for an hour 5 days a week. Great. Do you currently have 5 hours in your week that you genuinely want to give to that? If you do, that is wonderful and amazing. But if you don't, I would much rather see you start with something you can actually keep doing. Maybe that's 2 strength training sessions a week. Maybe it's walking after dinner a few nights a week. Maybe you having 20 minutes in the morning. Maybe you take 10 minutes at lunch and another 10 after dinner. And here's something I really want people to understand. Movement doesn't stop benefiting your body because it happened in a smaller chunk. So current physical activity guidelines specifically moved away from the old requirement that aerobic activity has to occur in bouts of at least 10 minutes to count. The evidence supports accumulating movement throughout the day while adults are also encouraged to do the muscle strengthening activities on at least 1 to 2 days per week. So even if you can only do it in bits and pieces, it's still beneficial. So if you have 20 minutes, use 20 minutes. If today you have 10, use 10. We have to stop turning I can't do the ideal amount into there's no point in doing any of it. There's a very large space in between that. There's a large space between perfect and pointless. And while we're here, can we please release ourselves from the belief that the healthiest version of us automatically wakes up at 5 a.m.? If you love getting up at 5 or even 6, whenever, I support you. Go forth. Enjoy the sunrise. I will cheer you on. But there is no prize at the end of life for accumulating the most 5 a.m. workouts. Your routine needs to work with you. Maybe you are a morning person and 5 a.m. is great. Actually, I used to be in that routine and I absolutely loved it because it was the one less thing I had to think about later in my day. I like getting it out of the way. If you've been here any amount of time, you know that exercise is not my most favorite thing on the planet to do. But I know it's good for me and I know I need to do it. So I enjoy getting up early to do that and get it out of the way. Because I don't have to make the decision later on in the day whether I feel like going or if I am going to go or not. I just get up and do it before my body even realizes I'm awake. But your routine has to work with you. Maybe you are that morning person. Maybe you feel strongest in the afternoon. Maybe you work nights, or maybe mornings in your house are complete chaos. And the idea of adding a workout to them makes you want to throw this podcast across the room. Then don't do it in the morning. Remember our blueprint? The structure matters. Movement matters, but you get to choose where it fits in. You get to choose what it looks like. You get to choose the paint color. And I think that's where healthy routines become so much more sustainable. We're no longer trying to copy somebody else's life. We're building support underneath our own. There's something we haven't talked about yet. And I think this may be the thing that determines whether any of this actually fits, because you can plan the meals. You can choose the workouts. You can create the habits. You can put everything beautifully into your calendar. But if your calendar is already filled from the moment you wake up until the moment your head hits the pillow, where exactly are you supposed to put yourself? That's why I don't think we can have a real conversation about healthy routines without talking about margin. Because some of the things we need to add to our routine isn't another healthy habit. Sometimes we need to make room. So I think margin is one of those things we don't really notice until we don't have any. You know that feeling when you look at your calendar and there isn't necessarily one terrible thing on it. There's just no space between any of the things. You run from one commitment to the next to the next. You finish work immediately and move into whatever needs you at home. Someone texts and needs something. There's an appointment you forgot about. There's laundry waiting. There's an email you should probably answer. And before you know it, you're lying in bed thinking, I didn't stop at all today. How do I still have so much left to do? I've had days like that. And I think for a long time, I believed the answer was to become more efficient. If I could just manage my time better, or if I could get more organized, or wake up earlier, or make better lists, then surely I could fit everything in. But as I've grown and come to know myself, I've come to realize something. Sometimes everything doesn't fit, and that's okay. Maybe everything isn't supposed to. And that's a hard realization, especially if you're somebody who likes to help people. or you're the person everybody knows they can count on, or you genuinely have a lot of things you care about. Because none of those things filling your calendar necessarily have to be bad things. That's what makes this tricky. You can fill your entire life with good things and still leave absolutely no room to care for yourself. And then we wonder why we're exhausted. We wonder why we're grabbing whatever we can for dinner, why we aren't exercising, why we're sleeping poorly, why we're irritable, why we constantly feel like we're moving in 5 different directions. And sometimes we respond by giving ourselves another assignment. I really need to prioritize self-care. So now self-care becomes one more thing that we're supposed to squeeze on our calendar. And I don't think that's what we need. Because real self-care isn't another obligation. Sometimes real self-care is looking at everything we're already carrying and asking, does all of this still belong here? That's the question. And it takes us right back to the recalibration we've been talking about. Because maybe something that fit beautifully into your life 2 years ago just doesn't fit anymore. Maybe something you used to have the capacity for, you just don't right now. Maybe this particular season requires more of you at work or at home. Maybe you're caring for someone. Maybe your body is asking for more recovery than it used to. Maybe you've simply realized that you don't want to spend your life rushing from one thing to the next thing to the next thing anymore, feeling like you can't take a breath. None of that means you've become less capable. It means you're actually paying attention to the life you're actually living. And this is where boundaries become part of our healthy routine. We've talked about boundaries last week, and I think they belong here too, because a boundary is one of the ways we create that margin. Sometimes a routine isn't, what am I going to start doing? Sometimes it's, what am I willing to stop doing? And that's a little harder, isn't it? Because adding something feels productive. Saying no can feel uncomfortable, especially when saying no means disappointing somebody. That's hard. But every yes costs us something too. Time, attention, energy, and sometimes peace. That doesn't mean we become selfish or stop showing up for the people we love. It's quite the opposite, actually. I want to be able to show up for the people I love well. And I know I don't do that very well when I'm running on fumes. We've all heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. I know it's a little cliche, but it's cliche because there is truth in it. If I continually give away every ounce of my time and energy and leave whatever scraps happen to remain for myself, eventually there aren't going to be many scraps left. And that affects more than whether I got my workout in. It affects my patience, my mood, my self-esteem, my sleep, my relationships, my food choices, my ability to think clearly, even my desire to do things that I normally enjoy doing. Chronic stress isn't simply an unpleasant feeling we should learn to tolerate better. Our stress response system affects multiple processes throughout the body, and prolonged stress without adequate recovery has been associated with effects on cardiovascular health, metabolic health, immune and mental health. And that's one reason recovery isn't separate from health. It's part of it. And I do think we need to be careful here too, because I don't want someone listening to this during an incredibly difficult season and thinking, great, now I'm stressed about being stressed. That's not what I want. No, stress is part of being human. There will be seasons in life that ask more of us. The goal isn't to eliminate every stressful thing from our lives. It's to recognize that recovery matters too. And recovery doesn't have to mean a spa day. Sometimes it's just 20 quiet minutes. Sometimes it's a walk alone in nature. Sometimes it's some really good laughter with dear friends. Sometimes it's going to bed instead of watching one more episode. Get ready for this one. Sometimes it's asking for help. And I know that's hard for a lot of us. Sometimes it's saying, no, I can't do that this week. And sometimes for me, it's just being quiet with God. Because there's another kind of decision fatigue I notice myself, in myself when life gets really busy and noisy. And everybody else's voice gets very, very loud. The emails, the texts, the notification, the things I need to do, the lists that I wrote down, the things people need from me, the things I think I should be doing. And if I'm not careful, I can start my day by absorbing everybody else's priorities before I've even taken a minute to remember mine. That's why I think a healthy routine needs an anchor. And for me, that anchor is my faith. Now, I want to be careful here because even this can become another performance. We can hear, you need a morning prayer routine. And suddenly we're back to creating perfect, healthy person who gets up at 5 a.m., works out, journals, drinks the lemon water, and now we've added 30 minutes of prayer to the checklist. It's not what I mean. Your relationship with God is not another box on your wellness tracker. It's a relationship. And relationships need attention. For one person, that might mean quiet prayer first thing in the morning. For somebody else, it may be scripture with coffee. Maybe it's prayer during your drive to work. Maybe it's just a normal conversation like you'd have with anybody else when you're alone in the morning or in the afternoon. Maybe it's taking a walk and using that time to talk with God. Maybe it's simply sitting quietly for a few minutes before the day gets loud. The exact routine isn't the important part. The anchor is. Because before the world starts telling us who needs me, before my phone starts telling me what I missed, before my calendar tells me where I need to be, I need something that reminds me who I am and what actually matters. And when I make room for that, I notice that I'm different. Not because my schedule magically gets easier, but because I'm entering it differently. And I think that's an important distinction in this entire conversation. We're not building a routine so that nothing's ever difficult. We're building a routine that helps support us when it does. That's what margin gives us. A little room to adjust, a little room to recover, a little room for something unexpected, a little room to notice, I'm really tired today, or I haven't had any alone time lately, or I miss my friend and I want to spend time with her. Or, I haven't really felt very spiritually connected lately. And instead of pushing those signals aside because the schedule says we don't have time for that, maybe we listen. Because remember what we said at the very beginning, we're not going back to an old routine just because it's September. We're recalibrating. And part of recalibration is asking, what do I need in this season? Not forever, not for the rest of your life. Right now, just right now. Maybe this season requires more structure. Maybe it requires more rest. Maybe you need to cook more at home. Maybe you need to simplify meals because cooking is one more thing you just can't carry right now. Maybe you're ready to challenge yourself physically. Maybe your body's asking for recovery. There isn't one correct answer. That's why it's your blueprint. And I think we're finally ready to put it together, not with 10 new habits, not with an hour by hour schedule, and definitely not with a routine you found online that was designed for someone else's life. I want you to look at the life you actually have, the person you're becoming, and the things you've learned about yourself. And then we're going to decide what deserves a place in the blueprint now. So if you have a notebook nearby, grab it because we're going to do a very simple routine audit together. And I promise we're not making a giant list. We're just going to figure out where you are, what's already supporting you, and what might make nourishing yourself a little easier from here. So if you, pardon me. So if you have a notebook nearby, grab it. And if you don't, that's okay. You don't have to stop what you're doing or try to remember 12 questions I'm about to ask you. Actually, there aren't 12 questions. I really just want you to spend a few minutes thinking about your life. Not the life you wish you had more time for, not the beautifully organized version of your week that exists in your planner before Monday actually happens, the one you're living. Picture that. And if we're sitting together having coffee and you told me, Regina, I really need to get into a better routine, I don't think my first question would be, okay, what do you want to start doing? I would say, tell me about your week. What's Monday like? What happens when you get home from work? Which nights of your week are crazy? When do you actually have some breathing room? When do you feel the most tired? When do you notice yourself getting stressed or irritated or agitated with the people around you? And somewhere in that conversation, we probably start seeing things. You might say, Mondays are actually pretty good. I get home at a reasonable time. I usually cook dinner. I feel pretty organized. Great. Guess what? We're leaving Monday alone. Monday doesn't need our help. It's working. But then maybe you get to Wednesday and say, oh, Wednesdays are awful. Okay, now I'm interested in Wednesday. Not because Wednesday needs to become perfect. I want to know why Wednesday keeps feeling so hard. Maybe that's the day you have back-to-back commitments and you don't get home till 7. Maybe it's the day you continually skip lunch because your schedule gets away from you. Maybe it's the day you plan to exercise, but realistically, you don't have time to do it. In 3 months, you haven't been able to find time to do it on a Wednesday. So instead of saying, I really need to be more disciplined on Wednesdays, what if we just acknowledge that this routine doesn't work on Wednesday? That's not failure. That's useful information because now we can do something with it. Maybe Wednesday becomes leftover night. Or we used to have what I called fend for yourself night at home. I would write F F Y, fend for yourself, on the meal planning sheet on the fridge. I had to think about that one for a minute. Maybe it's the night you have a freezer meal ready to go. Maybe you just don't work out on Wednesdays anymore, and that's okay. Maybe you pack a lunch Tuesday night because you finally accepted that Wednesday morning is never going to become calm, leisurely morning. We keep hoping it will be. That's recalibration. We're not trying harder to force ourselves into a plan that repeatedly doesn't work. We're adjusting the plan because we've learned something. And I'd keep moving through your week like that. Not looking for everything that's wrong, just noticing. Where does life flow? Where does it consistently get stuck or hard? And then I'd pay attention to something else too. How are you feeling while all of this is happening? Because your calendar doesn't tell me everything I need to know. Maybe your schedule looks completely manageable on paper, but you're exhausted. That's information. Maybe you've been getting through the afternoon on caffeine and sheer determination. That's information too. Maybe you're sleeping well. You have good energy. Meals feel pretty easy, but you're frustrated because you haven't figured out where movement fits in. Okay, now we know where to focus. This is what I mean when I say learn to listen to your body. I don't want us creating routines on what fits into an empty square on the calendar. I want us paying attention to the person who actually has to live that calendar. Because sometimes your body is going to tell you something your planner cannot. And I think this is one of the ways my own understanding of health has changed. There was a time when I probably would have looked at an open hour and thought, perfect, I can fit something in there. Now I'm much more likely to ask, okay, but do I actually have the capacity for something there? Or do I need that hour open for myself? And that's where I want you to begin your blueprint, not with what else can I fit into my life, but what would help support the life I'm already living. That's a much different starting point. Now, remember our houses. We're not choosing all the finishes yet. We're not picking the backsplash. We're certainly not wandering through the lighting section for 3 hours because apparently there are 487 different kinds of pendant lights. We're building the basic structure. And if this were my blueprint, and I'd want to look at the things that help me feel nourished and supported as a whole person. Food is obviously part of that. Movement matters. Sleep and recovery matter. My stress matters. My faith matters to me. My relationships matter. But I don't need to create a new goal for every one of those things today. That's where we get ourselves into trouble. Instead, I want to notice which parts of the house need attention right now. Maybe as you've been listening today, you already know. Maybe you've been thinking, it's dinner. Dinner is making me crazy. Great. Let's start there. Don't redesign your morning routine. Don't sign up for a new workout program. Don't order 6 supplements. Let's just focus on making dinner easier. Take 20 minutes this weekend. Look at your calendar like we talked about and decide what dinner needs to look like on the nights ahead. Maybe that's your blueprint for now. And then practice it. See what you learn. Adjust. Recalibrate. Because remember, a blueprint gives us structure, but we're still building the house. Maybe your answer is movement. You feel pretty good about food. Your meals aren't causing stress. Your sleep is good, but you miss feeling strong. Then maybe that's where you start. And instead of designing the perfect exercise routine, look at your real calendar and find the version that you can actually repeat with regularity. Even if that's twice a week for now. Start there. Let it become part of your life before you decide it isn't enough. You are allowed to build rest into the blueprint. Maybe that's the work. Maybe the healthiest thing you can do in this season isn't adding something. Maybe it's protecting your bedtime, creating some margin in your calendar, saying no to one commitment, giving yourself one evening where you don't have somewhere else to be. That's still building a healthy routine. And I think that's why I love this idea of a blueprint so much. Your blueprint isn't a contract. You're not signing something today that says, this is how I will live for the rest of my life. You're creating a structure for this season. And when this season changes, we'll recalibrate again. Because it will change. The kids will get older, your job will change, your body will change, your hormones will certainly change, your responsibilities will change, priorities change, we learn, and hopefully we grow. And a routine that has served you beautifully at one point may eventually stop serving you. It doesn't mean your routine failed. It did its job for the season it belonged in. So if you're writing today, I think there's really only one thing I want you to leave on that page. I want you to finish this sentence. Right now, taking care of myself would feel easier if. Right now, taking care of myself would feel easier if. Don't rush to answer it. I want you to really think about it. Taking care of myself would feel easier if. Maybe you need a plan for dinner. Maybe you need food in the house that you can grab quickly. Maybe you need a consistent bedtime. Maybe you need to stop expecting yourself to exercise at a time that never works. Maybe you need some help, or a little peace, or space. Maybe you need to reconnect with God. Whatever came to mind, whatever you wrote, pay attention to it. Because I have a feeling that you probably don't need me to hand you a 10-step blueprint. You already know where the friction is. And once you've identified it, don't ask yourself to fix your entire life around it. Just ask, what is one thing I could do this week that would make this easier? That's it. Not forever. This week. Because remember what we talked about at the very beginning of the episode? Thursday you is coming. It just might not be on Thursday. There will be a busy day. Something will run late. There will be a morning where you don't feel motivated, or a night when you're just exhausted. Our goal isn't to somehow eliminate those moments. It's to build enough support in our life that when they come, we aren't starting from zero. And maybe that's what a good routine really gives us. Not control, not perfection, not a beautifully color-coded life, but support. Something underneath us that says, I've already thought about this. I've made this a little easier. I've left myself some room. I've got you. And when I think about routine that way, it doesn't feel restrictive to me at all. It actually feels a lot like taking care of that person I am becoming. You know what I think is interesting is when most of us imagine having a really good routine, we picture the weeks when everything goes according to plan. We bought the groceries, we made the meals, we got the workouts in, we went to bed on time, the calendar behaved itself, nobody needed anything unexpected from us, and we think, yes, this is working. But I'm starting to think that's not actually the best test of a routine, because almost any routine can work when life cooperates. Maybe the better question is, what happens to your routine when life doesn't? Because that's going to happen. You're going to have a week where the meeting gets added to the calendar, or someone gets sick, you don't sleep well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've talked about that. Maybe it's just a week where you look around on Thursday and think, how is it Thursday already? Or why is it only Thursday? That's real life. And I don't want us building routines that only work when real life stays out of the way. I want a routine that can handle real life and flex and bend with it. I think that's another reason I've become so fond of the word recalibration, because recalibration assumes adjustment. It doesn't expect us to do exactly the same thing in exactly the same way every single day, every single week, every single season. It says, okay, something changed. What makes sense now? And I think that's a much healthier response than immediately deciding we've fallen off the wagon or we've failed in some way. Actually, can we just retire the wagon too? I don't want to be on a wagon. I don't want to be on a track. I just want to live my life and learn how to take good care of myself while I'm doing it. And sometimes taking good care of myself means adjusting the plan. Maybe I planned to do strength training 3 times this week, and by Wednesday, I can tell my body needs more recovery than that. That's okay. Maybe this is a 2 workout week. I didn't fail at 3. I responded to the information my body gave me. Maybe I plan to cook 4 nights, and Thursday turns into complete chaos. Okay. Thank goodness there's something in the freezer. Or maybe there isn't. Maybe we pick up something. It doesn't mean the meal plan is ruined. It means Thursday changed. And I think that's really important distinction here between being flexible and constantly abandoning things that didn't matter to us, or things that do matter to us. Because flexibility isn't, well, life is busy, so I guess I'll never take care of myself again. That's not what I'm saying. It's actually almost the opposite. It's knowing what matters enough that you can find another way to honor it, even when life gets crazy. If I can't do the 40-minute walk I promised myself, maybe I can do 15. If I don't have time to make the dinner I planned, maybe I can still put together something that nourishes me and my family. If my mornings get completely derailed and I miss the quiet prayer time I wanted, maybe I turn off the radio in the car and spend that drive talking to God. The form can change without abandoning the intention. And I think that's really an important part of the blueprint. The foundation stays. How we live inside the house can change. Remember when we talked earlier about choosing the floors, the paints, and the cabinets? That's the flexibility. We still know what we're building. We're simply allowed to look at our life and think this is where we can finally let go of the idea that consistency means doing something perfectly. Consistency isn't perfection repeated. It's returning repeatedly. And that's different. You can mix a workout and still be someone who moves her body. You can eat takeout and still be someone who nourishes himself well. You can have a stressful week and still be someone who values peace and rest. You can sleep terribly one night and still care deeply about your sleep. One moment doesn't erase the pattern you're building. And I think sometimes we give individual choices far too much power. One dinner becomes, well, I blew it today. One missed workout becomes, this week is shot. One busy month becomes, I just can't stick with anything. No, you had a meal. You missed a workout. You had a busy month. That's all. That's what it means. Now, what do you need? That's recalibration. And the more we practice that response, the less dramatic health has to become. We don't continually need a reset. We don't need another detox. We don't need to wait until Monday. We don't need January 1st. We don't need to announce that we're starting over. We just adjust. And I think there's something incredibly peaceful about that. Because now my routine isn't something hovering over me, keeping track of whether I've been good enough. It's working for me. It's there to make my life easier. It's there so I don't have to figure out breakfast every morning. It's there so dinner doesn't become a daily emergency. It's there so movement has a place in my week. To remind me that rest belongs in my life too. To make room for things that keep me grounded. And that's what I want your routine to become. Not another standard you feel like you have to live up to, but I want it to be a support system for you. And I think you'll know you've built a good one when you stop thinking about it quite so much. When the things that once required all of this effort and negotiation starts feeling more familiar. Sunday's just when I look at my calendar. I keep a couple dinners in the freezer. These are the mornings I usually move. This is when I slow down. Not because you have to, because you've learned. Life feels better when you do. And maybe that's the biggest shift I hope you take away from this entire episode. We aren't trying to create a perfectly organized life. We're trying to create a life where nourishing ourselves isn't always the hardest choice available. Because when we take care of ourselves continually, and it requires the most time, the most effort, the most planning, the most willpower, and everything has to go perfectly to pull it off, eventually something's going to give. So I'd like to make it easier. Put the food in the house. Make the decisions before we're exhausted. Leave some breathing room in the calendar. Let's choose movement we can repeat. Let's pay attention when our bodies tell us something isn't working. And then when life changes, we can change with it. Not because we're giving up on the person we're becoming, but because we're learning how to take care of that person in the life they're actually living. And that brings me right back to Thursday at 5:30, because Thursday is still coming. Maybe this time when you open the refrigerator, you don't have to stand there hoping dinner magically appears the second time you open the door. Maybe you already know. And sometimes something that simple can make an entire evening feel a lot different. So as we wrap up today, I don't want you turning off this episode feeling like you have a lot of work to do. Actually, if you do, I may have completely missed the point. I want you to feel like, oh, I can do this. I don't need to overhaul my life right now. I don't need to become an entirely different person. I don't need to be the perfect planner or on brand new meal plan or set a 5 a.m. alarm. I just need to make my life a little easier to nourish. And maybe this week it means sitting down for 20 minutes and actually looking at your calendar before you make a grocery list. Maybe you finally make one of those dump and go meals that you pinned on Pinterest like 2 years ago and put an extra one in the freezer, right? Maybe you stop scheduling workouts at a time you know does not work and choose a time that actually does. Or maybe you've listened to this whole episode and realized, I don't need to add anything right now. I need some margin. Then listen to that. Because remember, this isn't about building my routine. It's about building yours. And if you're not sure where to start, go back to the question we asked earlier. Right now, taking care of myself would feel easier if, and finish that sentence. And then don't turn that answer into a 10-step project. Just ask, what's one thing I could do about that this week? One, just one. Give yourself a chance to practice it. See what works, see what doesn't work. Pay attention to how you feel. And then recalibrate. Because 6 months from now, your blueprint may look entirely different. Honestly, I hope it does. Because that means you're still learning. You're still paying attention. You're still growing. And I want to connect this back one more time to our conversation from last week. We asked, is this a choice the person I am becoming would make? I still love that question. But after today's conversation, I think we can add another one. What can I do now to make that choice easier for them later? That's planning. That's routine. And I think that's also love. It's looking at the person you're becoming and saying, I know life is going to get busy. I know you're going to get tired. I know you're not always going to feel motivated. So I'm going to make this a little easier for you. I don't know about you, but that feels so much better to me than get it together, Regina. That's the kind of relationship I want you to have with your future self. Not constantly demanding more from them, but supporting them. And if you're listening today and thinking, I know where I'm struggling, I just don't know what would actually work for me, that's where having someone walk right alongside you can make such a difference. That's a big part of what I do in my nutrition coaching. And I'm not interested in handing you somebody else's perfect routine. I want you to understand your life, what's working, where you are getting stuck. What does your body need? What are you trying to accomplish? And how can we build habits around all of that that you can actually live with and be excited about? Because the goal isn't for you to need me forever. The goal is for you to become confident enough in understanding and nourishing your body that you know how to recalibrate when life changes. And if you'd like some help doing that, you can learn more about my coaching programs at www.nourishwithregina.com. Also, come hang out with me during the week on Facebook and Instagram at Nourish with Regina, because we'll keep this conversation going there too. And if today's episode made you think of somebody who's standing in front of their own proverbial refrigerator right now, send it to them. Maybe they're telling themselves they need more discipline when what they really need is a little more support. And next week, we're going to keep building on this conversation with an episode I'm really excited about. Muscle is medicine. Why getting strong may be one of the best things you can do for your future self. We're going to talk about why muscle matters as we age, not just for how we look, but for how we feel, how our metabolism, our blood sugar, bones balance, our independence, and our ability to keep doing the things we love. Because aging is inevitable, but becoming weak and frail doesn't have to be. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts so you don't miss that conversation. And in the meantime, come find me on Facebook and Instagram. Like I said before, if you've been thinking, I know what I want to change, but I could use some help, I do offer a few different coaching programs, so you can check those out on the website. And stay close because I have some really good things in the works, including a Nourish membership in the future and some downloadable resources that will let us go deeper into specific topics. I'm really excited about where Nourish is headed. I've been doing some website updates, so go ahead and check that out. I have some things in the works that I'm really excited to share with you when the time is right. In the meantime, you don't have to overhaul your life. Just pay attention to what you need. Make the nourishing choice a little bit easier and give yourself permission to recalibrate as life changes. And as always, keep nourishing your body one simple choice at a time. Bye.